Hello, everyone, and welcome back to yet another edition of the GSMC Fantasy Sports Podcast, brought to you, as always, by the GSMC Sports Network. My name, as always, is Christopher Shepard. Thank you, guys, for tuning in. Today's show is a very special one. Happy Wednesday. First of all, guys, we made it the middle of the week. This show is special to commemorate that occasion. Every single segment will be dedicated to the betting odds of a specific NFL award. Whether it be MVP to Offensive and Defensive Rookie of the Year, we will be dissecting each and every one of the betting odds and the betting favorites, respectively, for these specific awards. Should be a good one. But before we get into any of those details, let's jump right into the start of the show with saying, please consider liking and following and subscribing to the show and the network. It is a huge support to all those involved, and if you do feel so inclined, we do receive a ton of tips and donations as well, so please consider leaving them in the link gsmc.cloud. It is a huge support to both me and my fellow podcasters and ultimately the network as a whole. Also, if you have any questions, comments, or concerns about anything pertaining to the show, you can also leave them there and they will be addressed at the beginning of the next episode. Without further ado, let's jump right into what should be a fantastically fascinating show about all of these NFL awards, starting off with the most prestigious of all, perhaps the most prestigious in all of sports, the NFL MVP award. And this top five is definitely much more varied than we've seen in the past because we've always seen at least one heavy favorite emerge a little bit early on, but this one definitely feels very balanced. Some of these guys you may not have expected to even be in the top five. Some of these guys coming off injury, some of these guys still young, haven't really had the opportunity to have their say in the MVP voting. Without further ado, let's jump right into it. We're going to stick with this graphic right here, and we'll count down the top five. Starting off with a guy who has a new head coach and shockingly could be a very sneaky dark horse. A lot of people might not be expecting much out of him. But this year could be different because he has a new head coach, new philosophies, and it's almost like a clean slate for him. And we begin with, at number 5, Mr. Justin Herbert. A lot of people might be skeptical as to why he's on this list, seeing as to how he does not have one of the more talented wide receiver rooms in the league. In fact, he perhaps has the worst wide receiver room out of any of these guys in the top 5. But I think the reason why he's on this list is because of that new coach, like we said, in Jim Harbaugh. Jim Harbaugh, I feel like, is going to simplify the offense, not going to make it too complex, make sure that Justin Herbert feels comfortable, and most importantly, try and bring out the best traits in him. Because he knows that Justin Herbert has one of the best arms in the NFL. He knows Justin Herbert can throw for a lot of yards, and he knows that ultimately Justin Herbert doesn't necessarily care about who he has as a receiver. He's had a mix of different guys. He's had Keenan Allen, he's had Mike Williams in the past. But this year, I feel like he's going to fully prove why he's one of the NFL's elite quarterbacks. I kind of feel like this is justified a little bit. At plus 1,400, he's kind of a longer odd than one would like in a top 5 QB in MVP standings. But I think he's very appealing, mainly because of Jim Harbaugh's simplification. In terms of Brandon Staley's offense, it definitely felt very forced. It not only felt like they wanted to exploit Justin Herbert's one true strength and not make sure that he's developing in different ways, making sure that, he's not just looking for the vertical deep shot. He's mainly looking for receivers over the middle and short to intermediate routes, and I think that's what Jim Harbaugh is going to do. And it might not be the most appealing wide receiver room to throw to, but he certainly has some guys that he relies upon, like Joshua Palmer. A lot of people can emerge, like Vlad McConkey, their exciting young draft pick. And so, overall, while it's definitely not the most intriguing option as a long shot, I think you could take a flyer on him should he, in the first couple of games, prove that he's really learning the complexities of a Jim Harbaugh offense while also caring more about the nuances of his passing game. Coming in at number 4, though, is a guy who just won MVP, but I don't really like this year, in Lamar Jackson. I think that the problem with Lamar is not just, the frequent injuries. It's not just, the lack of a true deep passing game. It's more about how I feel the Ravens' offense is going to evolve. They felt like Derrick Henry was a guy who could be one of those workhorse running backs who could really ground and pound instead of, running back by committee approach that the Ravens usually employed. And so adding him certainly adds a different depth to this offense that the Ravens haven't necessarily had. It adds a piece to consider in terms of how you want to attack opposing defenses. Yes, I feel like Lamar is always going to have that dual threat ability. He's always going to have the designed RPOs. He's always going to have the ability to have more touchdowns than other certain QBs because of his rushing ability. But this year definitely feels a little bit different. And while he certainly has one of the best wide receiver rooms he's ever had in his illustrious career, I feel like the Ravens want to switch to something that kind of alleviates the burden on Lamar Jackson. When we talk about Lamar Jackson, we talk about all the pressures heaped on him to actually throw the football downfield. But now that he actually has a receiving core, they want to make sure that it's not just trying to get Lamar to pass. They want to keep that variation and verbiage to their offense. And adding Derrick Henry certainly helps in that regard because he's definitely more of a smash-mouth traditional running back. As someone who's kind of aging into a stage where he can't necessarily rely on, just strength and agility, he's going to rely more on ground and pound, smash you in the mouth football. And that adds a physicality and grittiness to the Ravens offense they haven't really had. Thus, kind of focusing more on exploiting certain things that Lamar Jackson sees. And that's why I feel like Lamar Jackson's candidacy at plus 1,200 might be a little bit in jeopardy. I still think he's a viable candidate, as always. He's already won 2 MVPs. But right now, this current stage, these top 3 guys are a lot more intriguing. Let's move on to number 3, because this guy certainly was one of the most fascinating quarterbacks last year in his rookie season, and now a heavily coveted MVP favorite in C.J. Stroud. We can say all we want about this man, he's definitely deserved it. One of the best rookie seasons in recent memory by any position player in the history of the NFL. Most passing yards by a rookie, most passing yards in a single game by a rookie. And his star, I believe, will continue to ascend. And C.J. Stroud is definitely someone who I feel is like a strike while the iron is hot kind of player. And what I mean by that is, while the Texans have this freshness about them, this new look to them, this revitalization to them, where they're in the period of his career where he's still in his rookie-friendly contract and they could add more pieces. They've added more pieces to their offense, as we've seen with Stephon Diggs and Joe Mixon. They added more pieces defensively as well. And I really like, while the iron is hot, while C.J. Stroud has all these weapons available to him, and while he feels comfortable with these weapons in this setting, I think this is where his MVP candidacy is going to be at its finest. This is where he's in the period of his career that feels like he could really start garnering more award consideration. Because right now the Texans are on the precipice of being a true contender in this league. And C.J. Stroud is the face of that. So if he continues to develop as a passer, and not only develop as a passer, but incorporate different parts that the Texans acquire for him in this very team-friendly period, then C.J. Stroud will have one of the more appealing cases to be an MVP candidate. Plus 1,000 this year, I would definitely take those odds. I feel like this is finally the year that someone who's young and fresh in the league can really challenge the big boys. This duopoly at the top definitely are very strong, but they have their kind of concerns and questions surrounding them. C.J. Stroud right now definitely feels like someone who you don't have to search for answers on either. And so at number 3, I think there's a lot of value. But these top 2 guys definitely are 2 of the best competitors in this league. Starting off at number 2, maybe a guy who shouldn't be this high. in all reality because of his injury woes. But when he is on the field and throwing the football, he is definitely one of the best quarterbacks in the AFC and in the entire NFL, and that is Joe Burrow. Joe Burrow at plus 900 definitely feels like a very heavy overvaluation considering how he came out of that very weird wrist injury. And this year definitely feels like one of those years for the Bengals where if they don't figure it out in a hurry, a lot of players' careers will be in jeopardy, especially like his receiving core. We've talked about it a lot. T. Higgins kind of playing out the franchise tag. So should he decide to go at the end of the season, then this whole Cincinnati Bengals project that they're building could fall apart. And when I look at the structure of their offense, it is very Joe Burrow-centric, but not in an appealing MVP-esque kind of manner, because I feel like Joe Burrow relies on his receivers very heavily, and that's always something that's good in a QB, but you can't always do that. You have to sometimes rely on your own abilities. And Joe Burrow, as we've seen throughout his career, has had decimated offensive lines. And maybe that's the reason why the Bengals have this quick passing game employed around him to kind of protect him. That doesn't mean that you can't exploit the nuances of Jamar Chase's game. You can't exploit the nuances of T. Higgins' game. And I feel like the Bengals are in a win-now period where if they fail to win anything or even get to the AFC Championship, then who knows what's going to happen to the structure of this team. It could collapse around them. And so this definitely feels like a make-or-break season for Joe Burrow. And I think being second in MVP odds might be a little bit too much pressure on him, and also might be a highly overvalued kind of pick here. But I get it, because when he's on the field, he's definitely one of the best. But he's not better than the number one guy. No surprise here, Patrick Mahomes. Say what you like about this guy. Say what you like about last season and how he performed. But at the end of the day, he's the best quarterback right now in the NFL. And he might, at the end of the day, be the best quarterback in the history of football. Now, the reason why I think Patrick Mahomes is the favorite here at plus 500 is because, well, he doesn't have the most talented wide receiver core he's ever had. He has the most speedy wide receiver core he's ever had. And what the Chiefs love to use is that speed. Also, you have to factor in the factor that they might have drops and they might have moments of inconsistency like last year, but Marquise Brown and Xavier Worthy add that new dimension to this Chiefs offense they haven't had since the Tyreek Hill era there. And so adding that factor really opens up the Chiefs offense a lot more. It's not just Patrick Mahomes having to rely on Kelsey to bail him out and relying on secondary receivers like Justin Watson or guys of that nature. It really allows him to focus in on exploiting what he loves best. And when you give Patrick Mahomes one speedy guy, let alone two, then it opens up a whole new possibility for what the Chiefs can be. And Patrick Mahomes will always be at the center of it because he's one of the most talented players we've ever seen. And so with that should end our NFL MVP segment. Coming up next, we stick kind of on the offensive side of the football with our Offensive Player of the Year betting odds. See who are the favorites there. We'll be right back with that after the break.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord.